Welcome back, Left Reckoners. David here, joined by our good friend and comrade, Chip Gibbons, Policy Director at Rights and Dissent. Chip, it is so exciting to have you on this program. I think the last time we were talking about, a slight opening in this case.
Yes.
But I don't think either of us sort of thought at this moment we might be having the conversation we're having right now. What happened?
So on Monday evening, I got back from the gym. I was doing some stuff. I put my phone down. I came back. My phone had blown up. I'm like, why is everyone messaging me? Leave me alone. It's 7:40 on a Monday night. Don't you have anything better to do? And I had all these messages saying Julian Assange had just pled and would be going free. And I said, this isn't true. And then it was true. Julian Assange, after 14 years in some form of captivity, has finally walked a free man. For the last 5 years, he was in Belmarsh prison, a maximum security prison, one of the harshest in the world, as he was awaiting fighting his extradition to the U.S. We can talk about why he was doing that in a minute. And for the 7 years before that, he was in the Ecuadorian embassy in a situation that the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention ruled was an illegal form of arbitrary detention. Assange had been granted political asylum by Ecuador, but he was never allowed to leave the embassy because the UK government invented a number of reasons why they would arrest him. Some of these were related to a preliminary investigation into sexual misconduct in Sweden, which is a serious charge, although it never resulted in criminal penalties or criminal charges. And Assange offered to participate in the investigation, but Sweden refused to agree not to send him to the U.S., which they were obligated to under international law, which is why the UN Working Group ruled he was arbitrarily detained illegally. And the UK government, we know through the FOIAs of Stefania Marici, Sweden wanted to drop the investigation. The UK government told them to keep pushing it, to trap him in the embassy. And after he was interviewed by Sweden in the embassy over the objection of the UK then brought bail hopping charges, which we know were brought directly at the request of the White House. So he was in this embassy trapped. Clearly because they wanted to grab him and send him to the U.S. But before that, he was under house arrest. So after this 14-year ordeal, Julian Assange is a free man. He pled guilty to one count of conspiracy to violate of the conspiracy provision under the Espionage Act. He had been facing 18 counts, 17 under the Espionage Act, one under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And it's interesting if you look at what he's actually said he did. He told a judge, let me tell you what he told the judge at the trial. He said, when he had to explain what his crime was, he said, working as a journalist, I encouraged my source to provide information that was said to be classified in order to publish that information. I believe that the First Amendment protected that activity. I also believe that. I believe the First Amendment and the Espionage Act are in contradiction with each other, but I accept that it would be difficult to win a case given all these circumstances. In the criminal information, as well as the plea agreement that Assange agreed to, what is alleged is that between 2010 and 2011, Julian Assange was in a criminal conspiracy with Chelsea Manning. Chelsea Manning is a whistleblower. As part of this criminal conspiracy, they committed 3 criminal acts. Act 1 was that Chelsea Manning gave Julian Assange national defense information she had lawful possession of that he was unauthorized to receive, knowing that he intended to publish it. Act 2, Chelsea Manning gave Julian Assange national defense information she did not have authorized possession of, that he did not have access, did not have authorization to, believing he would likely publish it. And Act 3 is he received the information. So essentially, the criminal conspiracy is a whistleblower had evidence of war crimes and human rights abuses, and she gave them to a journalist, hoping the journalist would publish the information, and the journalist did. The U.S. government calls this conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defense information. You might know this, David, under the name journalism. Better name for it. And my friend Kevin Gostola wrote a book on the case called Guilty of Journalism, and I gave him a call today and said, you picked the best title for your book because Julian Assange is in fact guilty of journalism. And it's worth pointing out that Assange's detractors, those apologists for the U.S. government, would throw all these other accusations at Assange, that he was a hacker, he went beyond mere journalism, this or that. And in the final equation, what the U.S. government agrees Assange did, which they call conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defense information, and Julian Assange and I call journalism, was have a source give him information and receive it. And in the plea, as part of the conspiracy, they note that WikiLeaks had a most wanted section on its website of the leaks that it most wanted. So if you're a journalist and you say, I think the
Have a beat?
Well, I have a beat. Yes, David. Yes. If you say, I think the Iraq rules of engagement are something newsworthy, and someone who has them should give them to me and publish them. And I was involved in anti-Iraq war organizing with U.S. soldiers. There was always a lot of discussion about what the U.S. Rules of engagement in Iraq were. Those are totally newsworthy. You've now engaged in a conspiracy, and if a third party you've never met gives you under this theory, gives you the information, you're criminally liable. The good news is that Julian is free. The good news is that a plea deal does not set a legal precedent, right? If Assange had gone to court and lost and appealed it, that would set a legal precedent. If anyone else is charged under similar facts, or even somehow the same facts, that person could hypothetically challenge it in court as being unconstitutional. There is no legal precedent set here. Obviously, there is a political precedent set by the fact that the U.S. spent 14 years trying to destroy Julian Assange, that the U.S. tortured Chelsea Manning, that they tortured Julian Assange, that they spied on his lawyers, they spied on his doctors, they plotted to kill him, they forced him into an embassy, and then they put him in Belmarsh without charge. And that to the very last minute, they insisted that basic journalism is a criminal conspiracy. But Julian Assange, 100% stand by him taking this plea. I'm so thankful he's going home. I've never met him, but I know lots of people who do. I know his wife, his brother, his father. He has so many lawyers, more lawyers than anyone I know, for good reason. I know many of his lawyers. I messaged one of them when she was on the plane with him, going to the Northern Mariana Islands, wishing them good luck. So it's pretty exciting. Pretty exciting. I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. I mean, it is something to be extremely happy about, and it was something that I think, in addition to all those other things you're noting about, the spying, the threats, and all that he experienced. I was talking with Matt, who was in London as a graduate student when Julian Assange first, got holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy. And, we were just sort of chatting and, just sort of recognizes man, think about everything that's happened in your life, since that moment, all the things that you've been able to experience, and just think about, what that's meant for Julian Assange, who's, effectively either been holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy or in prison, to now be out of that country, to be heading home, it is truly remarkable, and something that is absolutely worth celebrating, while also recognizing, that, the best outcome obviously is just, complete exoneration and an apology and probably reparations, for what he had been put through. But knowing that, he's not going to spend the rest of his life in an American jail cell, which can't remember, Chip, if we said this publicly or privately, we were talking about, and I feel like fairly recently felt like exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah, my optimism went back and forth on this case when the current Labour government in Australia was elected. The Prime Minister Albanese had been, as an opposition candidate, extremely vocal about ending the Assange case, and I was aware that there were some behind the scenes maneuvers from the Australian government that was giving a lot of people hope. But then we had these appeals. We then heard the FBI was looking for witnesses. And then you had the really bizarre case of the convicted WikiLeaks Vault 7 source who denies he's the source still, I think. And he got a really draconian sentence, and you really started to wonder where this was going. I've heard rumors about what pushed the government over the edge to plead with him. I don't want to scoop anyone, so I won't say anything too much about it. But it does seem like the fact that Assange was granted an extremely limited appeal right did motivate the government here. Also, the pressure from the Australian government, and also, and we cannot underplay this, the international global movement to free him and grassroots support. I do not believe without all of the activists pushing this, pushing members of Congress like Rashida Tlaib to speak up, and I don't think he'd be going free. And I was active on several imprisonments of Chelsea Manning. But, when Obama was considering commuting your sentence, most people didn't think he would do it. And I'm like, well, we have to keep pushing people to call, to write. And I think, that pushed Obama to commute her sentence. And in that case, Chelsea Manning should have gotten a pardon. She served more time in prison for giving information to the media than anyone in history. And a commutation was less than what she should have gotten. A plea of time served is less than what Julian Assange should have gotten. But these are still tremendous victories, even if they're only partial victories that are only possible because of the organizing of people. And I want to say something. Somebody asked me the other day, and I get asked this all the time, does any of this sort of whistleblowing and journalism and revelations really matter if we live in a society where people are also distracted by things? And, the U.S. government spent 14 years trying to destroy Assange and Manning and WikiLeaks. They've tried to destroy Snowden for the sole purpose of making sure no one would do this again. We see the Congress trying to ban TikTok because they blame it for pro-Palestinian sentiment. We see Israel assassinating journalists and banning Al Jazeera. The governments around the world will go to any length possible to silence and repress the truth. They believe in the power of the truth. They do, and we should too. Mm-hmm. We shouldn't get cynical about it. These governments would not be going to the great lengths they are if they thought nothing mattered.
No, I mean, I really do think that's a tremendously important point. And I think just looking at the scale of the assault on Julian Assange, but also the attempts to muddy the waters as to what he did. We won't play it again, but on Tuesday, we played Rachel Maddow, who's been an Assange hater, we could maybe say.
He was an Assange hater, but then at one point she criticized the charges. So it's a strange world.
A very strange world. Well, yeah, and there's frustration with the way that Trump did it, But, one of the things that was notable is, again, just endless conversations about 2016 and Hillary Clinton and the leak. And I think we talked about this probably every single time we've had you on the program. Feel free to comment on it if you'd like to. I think the larger point is just... The larger point is just they've thrown so much stuff at the wall against Julian Assange, be it this or some of the other accusations that have been made against him, because the fundamental reality is, as we were talking about earlier, it's almost like the rose-tinted version of journalism, right? It's like the journalism that you learn about in middle school, right? It's like a source gives information about government wrongdoing to a journalist, and the journalist gets out that information despite the fact that maybe the government wants it hidden. And that's what they've persecuted him for. And they don't want that conversation. So instead it's this kind of murky, shadowy, dangerous, maybe morally wrong person. And again, that goes to show just how dangerous a kind of symbol like Julian Assange is to, the American state.
I am so tired of hearing about the 2016 election, just period, from all parties and supporters of all candidates in it. I mean, it was a long time ago. move on. As far as the DNC leaks or hacks or whatever you believe that was, the DNC tried to sue WikiLeaks. The judge threw the court suit out, arguing that it was clearly protected by the First Amendment. Robert Mueller investigated WikiLeaks and Julian Assange over the leaks. He concluded there were no criminal charges that could be brought because they could not prove that WikiLeaks was involved in the alleged hacking, knew about it, or took part in it. There's a pretty clear Supreme Court precedent that journalists can publish illegally obtained material and not be held criminally liable, unless they participated in the illegally obtaining it. There's no evidence that anyone ever, in criminal investigation, in CIA covert action, whatever, has ever been able to come up that WikiLeaks participated illegally in obtaining that information. They received it. We can talk about whether or not they made the right editorial call. I think if you have newsworthy information, you publish it. They published Sarah Palin's emails in 2008. I don't hear people still blaming them for John McCain losing the election. And, Sarah Palin's emails were pretty stupid, to be honest with you. And I was thinking of an intellectual word to describe the intellectual qualities of Sarah Palin, but all I could come up with is stupid. That's not very polite of me. I apologize. But we don't hear endlessly about that. That was clearly not helpful for the McCain campaign. And on top of that, right, the only exception that might exist is if it's national defense information, and I don't accept that exception. But right, national defense information in its own category because of the Espionage Act, which, as written, is in clear conflict with the First Amendment. But there's, Hillary Clinton, the DNC's emails are not national defense information. There's no crime in publishing them. If someone wants to say you shouldn't publish hacked or leaked or stolen materials, I would remind you that every one publishing materials and whistleblowers is doing that at some level. But go ahead, have a world of investigative journalism where you get prior approval from the source you're investigating. But it has nothing to do with this, and I just don't want people are even bringing it up. I mean, Assange has had his character dragged to the mud. I don't know him personally. I can't refute or confirm every individual allegation made against him. I do know there's a campaign to vilify him. That campaign is to break support for him. People I know who know him do point blank have said the types of allegations and portrayal of him in the media are all lies. Even if they aren't lies, it doesn't change that Assange was accused of exposing war crimes as a journalist and pled guilty to exposing war crimes as a journalist. And you can say he got time served. He got 14 years of his life taken away from him. He got his life destroyed. He paid a pretty steep price. It's not a sweetheart deal. I know Mike Pence is whining, he got off easy or whatever. He didn't.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Not. I would not want to pay the price that Julian Assange paid. If Mike Pence thinks it's easy, he can go live in an embassy. He can go be psychologically tortured. He can watch his health deteriorate because he can't see a doctor. He can deal with the stress of perhaps never being able to touch or hug his wife or children again. He can go try those things and then come back after 14 years and be like, oh, yeah, that's really easy. It's a light sentence. Spend 5 years in Belmarsh, Mike Pence. Tell us how you feel. I mean, I don't wish that on anyone. I don't even wish that on Mike Pence. I don't wish that on war criminals. Like, what they did to Julian Assange was wrong. No human being should have that done to them. But if Mike Pence is so convinced this is a light sentence, give it a try for like a day. Spend a day in Belmarsh.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was interesting to see Mike Pence sort of pop his head up, knowing what he participated in for 4 years with Trump. But I wanted to sort of ask you, I mean, I know I want to maybe start switching it to talking about like some of the lessons and things that, you've gathered over these past, years, decade plus of advocating for Assange. I think that, I mean, maybe just like, we oftentimes talk about the Assange version of the history. I mean, how would you sort of categorize the kind of political history of the opposition to Julian Assange's captivity in the States and more broadly. But I'm curious because it feels like there have been some distinct phases in it, and like who's been advocating, who's been talking about them. A lot of it, are people who I think are fairly opportunistic. Donald Trump has said everything that's possible, frankly, to say about Julian Assange, from pro and against. But I mean, how would you sort of narrate that political history?
A year ago, I would have said the world in which this all started was radically different from the one we lived in, although thanks to the Gaza genocide, I think it actually bears some. I think we're probably back at the point in which it started. I mean, during the run-up to the Iraq War, the media acted as stenographers for the Bush administration's drive for a war of aggression. They did a terrible job at reporting on the Iraq and Afghanistan war. They did a terrible job reporting on torture. They did a terrible job on reporting on surveillance. James Risen famously has a story about illegal NSA surveillance, and the Bush White House convinces the New York Times to kill the story, and they only publish it 1 year after he has it because James Risen is going to put it in his book, and they don't want to be scooped by their own reporter. So you have a really terrible media landscape, and in this landscape, WikiLeaks arrives. And the original idea behind WikiLeaks is that they were going to use encryption to protect whistleblowers who want to give primary source documents to the media. And today, every newsroom in the world has SecureDrop or some version of this. But in 2006, 2007, this was wild. I remember someone telling about WikiLeaks in 2006, 2007 and being like, that's not going to take off. I don't understand that. And then I was proven very wrong 4 years later when WikiLeaks came out with the collateral murder video. And I had been involved in the anti-Iraq war organizing. Obama killed the election, really hurt the anti-war movement, but there was still remnants of it, especially anti-war soldiers and anti-war veterans. And when Chelsea Manning was arrested, she later tried to distance herself from the anti-war movement, saying she didn't feel like she was represented by it or they were her best advocates. That's her choice. But those groups really came forward to defend her. So there was this sort of remnants of the anti-Iraq war movement that had persisted into the Obama administration rallying around her. On top of that, I mean, one of the things that happens is WikiLeaks releases diplomatic cables about corruption in Tunisia. A street vendor, I believe it was in Tunisia, sets himself on fire. And, this is part of the events that sparks the Arab Spring. Decade plus after the Arab Spring, it doesn't have the same sense of hopefulness it did then, but that was very exciting. And then you have in the U.S. Occupy, and it's tough, I think, for those who weren't there to draw a connection between Chelsea Manning and WikiLeaks and Occupy Wall Street. But Chelsea Manning was extremely popular at Occupy Wall Street. I 100% remember being at Occupy Wall Street protests, and people would spontaneously break into chants of Free Manning. I remember being at the Occupy Congress Day, where we had Occupy Wall Street at the U.S. Congress, and afterwards people marched to the White House in the dark. And people just started chanting, Free Manning, Free Manning, Free Manning. People also used to chant Free Manning, Jail Barack Obama. That was a good one. And it was just such a political moment of the last remnants of Iraq, the rise of Occupy, which I don't think without Occupy you get the Bernie Sanders moment. And it just really was so different. And then, of course, Sanders comes forward in 2016. Julian Assange publishes Clinton's emails. A lot of people on the left get very angry about that. There always were libertarian and sort of weird paleocon Ron Paul types who supported WikiLeaks, supported Manning. They were always there. And I think there are honest right-wing supporters of Assange, WikiLeaks, who I disagree with on other issues, and I think there are disingenuous right-wing supporters of Assange and WikiLeaks, who I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but post the Clinton thing, a lot of people on the left turn on him. His libertarian supporters and his true left supporters, like myself, stick with him. And a lot of weird people get involved. People make up conspiracy theories about the Podesta emails, the Pizzagate stuff, that sort of thing, and all of that. That's not Assange's fault. I don't blame him for that, but it starts to taint him. He loses some of his left briefly, and there's this perception created that he's somehow a wrong perception, a completely wrong perception. These are all smears that, WikiLeaks is somehow a right-wing thing or a Trump thing. I don't think WikiLeaks views itself as either left-wing or right-wing. I mean, I'm obviously on the left. People who support them, like Corbyn and Chomsky, are as well, but they wouldn't use those sorts of terms to describe themselves. But during this period, it gets very difficult and very weird. And then Trump indicts him, Donald Trump, supposedly big WikiLeaks guy, and neither his detractors from the MSNBC crowd or supporters from the MAGA crowd will ever accept that Trump indicted him. You still see people online correcting people when they say Trump brought the indictment. When Tlaib did her letter about it, she mentioned, 5 years ago or 4 years ago, Donald Trump indicted him. Be like, no, Trump didn't. You're lying. It was Hillary Clinton who indicted him, or it was Barack Obama, or it was Joe Biden. And I'm most intrigued by Hillary Clinton indicting him. I know she has a lot of social capital in the American media. One of the most damning things about the American media is I think Hillary Clinton is an interesting and worthwhile person to listen to who has things to say they should take seriously. But she can't have you. She doesn't have judicial authority, thankfully. Two-time failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton cannot bring an indictment against you. But in the last couple years, we were clearly seeing the press freedom groups, and this is the U.S. When I would travel to the UK, it was Corbyn, it was the trade unions, it was the journalist groups, it was the anti-war groups, it was the pro-palace, it was the people you would expect to do this, and they were very organized and they were very smart.
But this is
yes.
This is the thing that I think is the reason that, apart from the importance to the First Amendment and to journalism. There was something that I think was very damning. This is my opinion. Tell me if you agree or not. But there's something very damning about the kind of status or place of the American left to see. I don't know, a political question that I think is very simple. It should be very simple for anyone on the left, anyone who's anti-war, became so muddied so quickly and so effectively in this country. And I'm not going to sit here and say that there weren't people. Obviously, there were people like you, all sorts of people on the left who continue to advocate. But there was a couple of years where if we would do this on Left Reckoning, or if we would do this on the Michael Brooks show, our comment section would just be filled with, detractors and so folks who agree with us on everything else for the most part, pro Bernie, anti-war, Medicare for all, et cetera, but also for some reason we need to torture a journalist for exposing American war crimes. It was something that was just very shocking to me to see how effective some of these techniques can be, and how unfortunately weak some of our left institutions are at this country at being able to combat that with your kind of general audience or general public. And it was fairly disheartening for me. Now, I was very inspired by people who never were shook by that. But when you compare it to other kind of countries, or the UK doesn't have their shit figured out either.
No,
but
they
the
don't.
fact that there's a little bit more consistency, at least with their more left wing groups at that time, I find to be something very notable.
House, and there'd be thousands of people from all over Europe. You could barely get into the courthouse because there were so many protesters. It's a huge issue around the rest of the world, and I really thank Progressive International for doing the Belmarsh Tribunal at the National. They did a bunch of Belmarsh, but the one at the National Press Club with Corbyn and Amy Goodman and Stephen Donziger. I also somehow got myself invited to speak at that. I'm not quite sure how I got on a stage with those people. It's still one of those how did I get here moments. That really helped. Because there were progressive congressional staffers in the audience, and when you have Corbyn and Amy Goodman and Stephen Donziger and a bunch of press freedom people saying, hey guys, let's get our acts together, that pushed it, and that got us the opening where we got the squad to speak out. That event is directly responsible for, or I guess indirectly, but is a huge part of the chain of events by which we got the squad to speak out, and then we got Jayapal and Jim McGovern and a bunch of other people. And that was a historic event. And I messaged the people who organized that the day he was freed and said, all your work is good, obviously, but the Belmarsh Tribunal with Corbyn at the National Press Club and Goodman and Donziger, that really was at a pivotal, I'm mispronouncing words now, an important moment. I mean, I remember the coalition around Chelsea Manning. It was Occupy. There was libertarians, the American conservative people, or the Ron Paul people, sure, but it was Courage to Resist, Veterans for Peace, Iraq Veterans Against the War, the free speech groups, obviously, but they don't have much of a street presence, to be blunt. I mean, Defending Rights and Dissent helped to organize the protest when it was Defending Dissent Foundation and Bill of Rights Defense Committee, but the big prestige free speech groups don't really organize street mobilizations. And it was the Occupy crowd. It was the anti-war and the Occupy people. And that was a good coalition. Of course, a bunch of other things happened to the anti-war movement. It splintered into 1,000 pieces over Syria. I'm not even going to say more than that, because that's just... But I do really think... And this actually doesn't make me happy. I'm actually quite depressed about this, that we are in the moment that we were in 14 years ago, where we have a government that is lying about wars, and we have a media that is acting as stenographers. The reporting about Gaza has to be some of them from CNN, not from Al Jazeera, not from Democracy Now!, but from CNN, MSNBC, Fox. It is the most shameful reporting I have seen since the Judith Miller stories about Iraq weapons of mass destruction. And we are marching to war with Iran. We're bombing Yemen. We're somehow still bombing Iraq. Israel has, I think, been given a green light to invade Lebanon. I make some of my fellow lefties mad. I'm not comfortable with arming Ukraine. I think we are extending a stalemated war. Obviously, Putin's invasion of Ukraine was illegal, a war of aggression. But we're not helping that situation. And we're just in such a perilous point. And the media is all just propaganda. And we are standing at the abyss. And the world needs another Chelsea Manning right now. It needs another Daniel Ellsberg. It needs another Julian Assange. And I think I don't. Who would come forward knowing what those people, what Manning and Assange went through? That's what the government's banking on.
That's, I think, and I think that's one of the difficult things about this moment, where, I think there's a happiness for Julian Assange to sort of have this chapter, come to a close. But the threat has been made, The threat has been made very clear to, as we talk about all the time, not just Americans, but to people from all nations, that, the United States will come for you if you expose their misdeeds. And it's an extremely frightening thing. And I think particularly, I'm not old per se, but I've been through at least a couple of, big movements at this point now. And to have that realization that, the world now is very similar to the one that I was leaving when I was graduating high school, when all this started happening with Assange. It's in a similar place. And
we're back in the Bush years. I truly, every day I have a flashback to George Bush years. Not even the Obama years when Assange. I think I have Dick Cheney PTSD in general. I ate well. I exercised the entire time Dick Cheney was vice president. Really, I had high blood pressure. The minute he leaves office, it went down. I blame him for that. He just made me so mad all the time. I don't think a doctor would have that, but I had Dick Cheney induced stress.
Oh, I feel but thinking about this span of time, I do really want to note just a couple things. I want to just be very clear for everybody. Julian Assange, as well as I understand it right now, Chip, Julian Assange is in Australia.
He's a free man in Australia. He's a free man in Australia.
He's incredible. So that process is complete. He's on the street. He can do what he wants. Wonderful, wonderful thing. I wanted to ask you, as somebody who has been an advocate for Assange and for press freedom for so long, what are some of the lessons that you've sort of gained, over this period of time, going through, one, like just kind of like personally and two, politically, right? One person is like, that's a lot of ups and downs to sort of go through. I can't imagine that it's particularly easy. And two, I mean, as somebody who's, again, has seen this movement go up and down, its kind of popularity and people's access to it, what are some of the lessons that you've sort of learned in your kind of advocacy work that people should maybe take heed to?
The lesson that I'm going to leave us with is we have to strike now the Espionage Act. I know that might not be the lesson you were thinking I was going to give, but right, Julian Assange and his lawyer Barry Pollock are 100% right. Assange's activity is First Amendment activity, and it violates the letter of the Espionage Act. We've seen Rashida Tlaib propose a number of reform measures to the Espionage Act. They're very good. I'm sure whoever wrote them, who I suspect we both know who that is a very smart person and a great left reckoning guest. So I can say that they're excellent proposals. We have to be pushing for those right now. I mean, I don't think we're going to reform the Espionage Act this year. It's a long struggle, but we have to be saying the Biden administration and the Trump administration both believe basic acts of journalism violate the Espionage Act. If that is the case, the Espionage Act as it is written cannot stand. It is not the time to take a break. Oh, maybe a little break. I'm a bit exhausted after these 14 years. But it is the time to escalate and keep fighting and take on the Espionage Act completely. That's what I'm going to do. I mean, I'm probably going to take a nap first. But, But yeah.
Well, I think that's very well deserved. Chip Gibbons, Policy Director at Defending Rights in Dissent. Chip, really, thank you so much for coming on this program today and all of these over these many years. And thank you so much for all of your work on this issue. It's made a massive difference.
Of course. Thank you so much.